For decades, you have likely been told that cholesterol is the ultimate villain, the grease that clogs the pipes of your heart and leads to disaster. But imagine for a moment that your arteries are not just passive pipes, but living tissue, and that cholesterol is actually acting like a firefighter rushing to a scene where a fire is already burning. If you only blame the firefighter for being at the scene, you miss the actual cause of the destruction, which is the fire itself. That fire is inflammation, and for seniors, it is often the silent engine driving high blood pressure, unstable blood sugar, and stiffening arteries. If you focus entirely on pushing down the cholesterol number without addressing the irritation that is damaging your vessel walls, you are fighting the wrong battle. I'm Dr. Ben Harris, and today I'm going to walk you through the specific practical steps to cool down that inflammation, stabilize your blood pressure, and protect your heart in a way that goes beyond just looking at a single number on a lab report. Here are 7 critical steps to addressing the real heart killer, starting with the most common mistake seniors make every single morning. The first step is about capturing the truth of what is happening inside your arteries before the day even begins. We often assume that if we see the doctor once every few months, or if we check our pressure whenever we happen to walk past the machine in the pharmacy, we are getting the full picture. But inflammation and blood pressure are dynamic. They change rapidly, and the most dangerous time for a senior with heart concerns is often the very first hour of the day. Let me tell you about Arthur. Arthur was 72 years old, and he was a man who prided himself on being precise. He kept a small notebook in his shirt pocket where he recorded his cholesterol numbers from every doctor's visit for the last 10 years. He was obsessed with his cholesterol, terrified that eating the wrong thing would clog his arteries. However, Arthur had a blind spot. He frequently woke up with a dull headache at the base of his skull, and he often felt a bit of brain fog until about noon. He assumed this was just part of getting older. When Arthur measured his blood pressure at home, he did it after he had been up for a while, usually after he had finished his morning routine, walked the dog, and settled into his armchair with his second cup of coffee. His readings were usually borderline, perhaps a little high, but nothing that made him panic. What Arthur did not know was that he was missing the morning surge. Arthur came to see me not because of his heart, but because he was feeling dizzy. We asked him to change his measurement routine completely. We discovered that in the first 30 minutes after waking up, before he had his coffee and before he took his medication, his blood pressure was skyrocketing. His body was flooded with inflammatory chemicals and cortisol the moment he woke up, placing immense strain on his arteries before he even buttered his toast. By measuring later in the day, he was missing the fire while it was burning hottest. The mistake Arthur made is one of the most common errors in senior health management. He was measuring his blood pressure when his body had already adjusted to the day. The morning surge is a natural rise in blood pressure that happens when you wake up, but in many older adults, especially those with underlying inflammation or blood sugar issues, this surge is exaggerated. It is like slamming your foot on the gas pedal of a car that has been sitting in the cold all night. This spike creates turbulence in the blood vessels, and that turbulence causes micro tears in the lining of the arteries. Guess what the body uses to patch those tears? Cholesterol. So the high blood pressure was creating the damage that the cholesterol was trying to fix. To get a handle on this, you need to measure your blood pressure correctly to see if you are experiencing this inflammatory surge. Here is exactly how you should do it. Do not wait until mid-morning. You want to check it relatively soon after you wake up, but not the very second you open your eyes. Get out of bed, go to the bathroom to empty your bladder, because a full bladder can add 10 to 15 points to your reading. Then, sit down in a comfortable chair with back support. This next part is where Arthur was getting it wrong. You must sit quietly for 5 full minutes. No television, no talking to your spouse, no reading the newspaper. Just sit and breathe. This allows your body to reach a baseline resting state. Your feet must be flat on the floor, not crossed at the ankles, and your arms should be supported on a table so that the cuff is at the same level as your heart. If you take your reading during this window, before coffee and before breakfast, you get a true look at your baseline cardiovascular stress. If this number is consistently high, it tells us that your system is inflamed and under pressure overnight. This is far more valuable information than a random reading taken at the pharmacy after you have walked from the parking lot. Once Arthur started seeing these high morning numbers, we did not just throw more pills at him. We adjusted his evening routine and his hydration, which we will discuss later in this list. But the first step was simply knowing the truth. You cannot fix an inflammatory problem if you are measuring at a time when the fire has already died down. By catching this morning surge, Arthur was able to take steps that eventually eliminated his morning headaches and stabilized his energy levels. This supports steadier readings throughout the entire day and gives you peace of mind that you are not missing the most critical window of heart health. Comment your age and whether you check your pressure in the morning or the evening. It is helpful to see how many people are tracking this morning surge window. The second step requires us to look at what you are putting on your plate, specifically regarding the texture of your blood and the health of your artery walls. For a long time, the advice for heart health was incredibly simple. If you don't want cholesterol in your blood, don't eat cholesterol in your food. We were told to banish eggs, avoid shrimp, and stay away from healthy fats. But modern understanding has shifted. We now know that for most people, the sugar in your blood does far more damage to the vessel walls than the cholesterol in your diet. Let me introduce you to Margaret. Margaret was 68 years old, and she was incredibly disciplined. If you opened her refrigerator, you would see rows of low-fat yogurts, skim milk, and plenty of fruit. She had not eaten an egg yolk in 20 years because she was terrified it would hurt her heart. Her breakfast every single morning was 2 slices of whole wheat toast with jam and a glass of orange juice. She thought she was doing everything right. Despite her strict diet, Margaret's inflammation markers were high. Her doctor told her that her triglycerides, a type of fat in the blood, were elevated, and her blood pressure was creeping up year after year. Margaret was frustrated. She felt she was sacrificing all the foods she loved, like omelets and roasted chicken with the skin on, yet her health was not improving. The problem was not the fat she was avoiding, it was the sugar she was consuming. When Margaret ate that toast, jam, and juice, her blood sugar would spike rapidly. Even though she wasn't diabetic, this spike is dangerous. When blood sugar rushes into the bloodstream, it can cause a process called glycation. I want you to think of glycation like steel wool. When there is too much sugar in your blood, it acts like sandpaper or steel wool scratching against the delicate lining of your arteries. This scratching causes injury. It causes inflammation. And what does the body do when an artery is scratched and inflamed? It sends cholesterol to patch the scratch. Margaret's high-carbohydrate breakfast was causing the very damage that her body was trying to repair with cholesterol. She was creating the fire with the sugar, and then blaming the cholesterol for showing up. We made a change to Margaret's routine that terrified her at first. We asked her to stop the toast and juice and instead have 2 eggs and a handful of walnuts. She asked, "Won't the eggs raise my cholesterol?" I explained that eggs are a source of protein and healthy fats, which do not spike blood sugar. By keeping her blood sugar stable in the morning, she would stop the scratching effect on her arteries. Within a few weeks, Margaret noticed something surprising. She wasn't hungry by 10 o'clock in the morning anymore. Her energy was steady. More importantly, her blood pressure readings started to soften. By removing the massive sugar spike, she reduced the inflammation in her vessels, allowing them to relax. Her triglycerides dropped significantly because triglycerides are often created by the liver in response to excess sugar, not excess fat. This is a simple swap you can make. If you are used to a breakfast that is sweet or bread-heavy, try shifting to a savory, protein-rich start. It does not have to be eggs if you don't like them. It could be Greek yogurt with some seeds, or perhaps some leftover chicken or fish from dinner. The goal is to avoid that sharp rise in blood sugar. When you eat protein and fiber, your blood sugar rises like a gentle rolling hill rather than a jagged mountain peak. That gentle hill means less inflammation, less damage to the artery walls, and ultimately less plaque buildup. It is important to note that we are not talking about eating unhealthy processed meats. We are avoiding things that are heavily processed or contain additives. But natural, whole foods like eggs, poultry, fish, nuts, and dairy are often much safer for your heart than the low-fat processed snacks that are full of sugar and flour. Margaret went from being a woman who was afraid of her food to a woman who enjoyed her meals again. She realized that the heart-healthy label on her sugary cereal box was misleading and that real food was the answer. This supports steadier readings and protects the physical structure of your blood vessels from unnecessary damage. If you are finding this helpful, please take a moment to subscribe. We share simple, research-backed tips like this specifically for seniors every week, and it helps us reach more people who need this information. The third step is a powerful tool you can use immediately, today, to lower both your blood pressure and your blood sugar. It involves using your body's natural mechanics to clear fuel out of your blood before it has a chance to cause trouble. This is not about joining a gym or running a marathon. It is about timing your movement to match your digestion. Let's talk about James. James was 75, a retired accountant who loved his routines. He ate lunch at 12:30 sharp every day, usually a sandwich and a bowl of soup. After lunch, James felt that heavy, drowsy feeling we often call the food coma. He would move to his recliner and nap for about an hour. He thought he was just resting his eyes, but his body was struggling. James had noticed that his blood pressure was always highest in the mid-afternoon, and his blood sugar levels were creeping into the pre-diabetic range. He didn't understand why. He walked every morning for 30 minutes, just like his doctor told him to. He felt he had done his exercise for the day, so the afternoon rest was earned. The mistake James was making was simple. He was loading his blood with fuel, lunch, and then parking the car, the nap. When you eat, your blood fills with glucose. If you sit or lie down immediately, that glucose has nowhere to go. It sits in the bloodstream, keeping your insulin levels high and your blood pressure elevated. The body has to work very hard to shove that sugar into the cells because the muscles aren't asking for it. This struggle creates inflammation. We asked James to try something different. We asked him to save his morning walk for later or to split it up. Specifically, we asked him to walk for just 15 minutes immediately after he finished his lunch. He didn't have to walk fast. A gentle, comfortable pace was all that was needed. Here is why this works. When you move your large muscles, like the quadriceps in your legs, they need energy. They become like sponges, soaking up the sugar from your blood to use as fuel. The beauty of this is that when muscles are moving, they can absorb sugar without needing as much insulin. It is a free pass for clearing glucose. James was skeptical. He loved his nap, but he tried it. He put on his shoes right after his last bite of sandwich and went for a stroll around his block. When he came back, he realized he wasn't as sleepy. The food coma is often caused by that massive blood sugar spike and the subsequent crash. By walking, he leveled out the spike. Over the next month, James saw a remarkable change. His mid-afternoon blood pressure readings dropped by several points. His evening blood sugar numbers were consistently lower. He wasn't exercising more in terms of total time. He was just exercising at the right time. This is a strategy called postprandial walking, or walking after a meal. It is one of the most effective ways to lower inflammation because it prevents the sugar from lingering in the blood where it can cause glycation, that steel wool effect we talked about with Margaret. You can do this at home. If the weather is bad, you can walk laps in your hallway or simply march in place while watching television. The goal is to keep the body upright and moving for 10 to 15 minutes after you eat. It aids digestion, reduces gas and bloating, and most importantly, it acts as a natural medication to lower blood sugar and pressure. For seniors, this is also safer than long, intense bouts of exercise because it is gentle and frequent. It keeps the joints lubricated without overstressing them. James eventually found that he didn't even need the nap anymore because his energy remained stable throughout the afternoon. This supports steadier readings and turns your muscles into allies for your heart health. If you have chest pain, fainting, severe shortness of breath, or one-sided weakness while walking, of course, stop immediately and seek emergency care. But for most, this is a safe, gentle, and highly effective habit. The fourth step brings us to the time of day when you are not conscious, but your body is working harder than you realize. We often think of blood pressure management as a daytime activity, eating right, moving, taking pills. But for many seniors, the root cause of their inflammation and heart stress is happening while they are asleep. Consider the story of Linda. Linda was 70 years old and described herself as a worrier. She was always anxious about her health, her grandchildren, and her house. She had high blood pressure that was resistant to medication. Her doctor had her on 2 different pills, but her numbers were still hovering in the danger zone. Linda told me, "I sleep for 8 hours, but I wake up feeling like I ran a marathon." She looked tired. She had dark circles under her eyes. When we looked at her history, we noticed that her blood pressure didn't dip at night. In a healthy person, blood pressure should drop by about 10 to 20% while sleeping to give the heart a rest. In Linda's case, it stayed high or even went up. This is a condition called non-dipping, and it is a major red flag for inflammation. We asked Linda about her sleep. She said she snored occasionally and sometimes woke up gasping or with a dry mouth. These are classic signs of sleep apnea, a condition where the airway collapses briefly during sleep, cutting off oxygen. Here is what happens in the body when this occurs. You stop breathing, your oxygen levels drop. Your brain panics and thinks you are suffocating. It blasts your system with adrenaline and cortisol, the stress hormones, to wake you up just enough to take a breath. You might not fully wake up. You might just shift a little and go back to sleep. But Linda was doing this dozens of times an hour. Every time her brain sent that panic signal, her blood pressure spiked. Her heart rate jumped. Her body was flooded with inflammatory chemicals. Instead of 8 hours of rest, her heart was enduring 8 hours of stress. It was like she was being startled by a loud noise all night long. No amount of kale or walking during the day can fully counteract 8 hours of nightly trauma to the heart. Linda finally agreed to a sleep study. The results were severe. She stopped breathing nearly 30 times an hour. She was fitted with a CPAP machine to keep her airway open. The transformation was profound. Within 2 weeks of treating her sleep issue, her daytime blood pressure dropped significantly. Her inflammation markers went down because her body finally had a chance to cool off at night. The fire was no longer being stoked while she slept. Now, not everyone has sleep apnea, but many seniors have poor sleep quality due to other factors like a room that is too warm, light pollution, or simply getting up too often to use the bathroom. The lesson from Linda is that you must prioritize sleep as a cardiovascular treatment. If you snore loudly, if you wake up gasping, or if your partner tells you that you stop breathing, please talk to your doctor. It is not just about being tired. It is about the physical damage that the nightly adrenaline spikes are doing to your arteries. Even if you don't have apnea, simple sleep hygiene can lower inflammation. Keep your bedroom cool. Try to keep a consistent bedtime. Avoid screens and bright lights for an hour before bed. These small changes help lower your cortisol levels, which in turn helps your blood pressure dip naturally at night. Linda told me later, "I didn't realize how bad I felt until I started feeling good." She had accepted the fatigue as normal, just like Arthur accepted his headaches. By fixing the sleep, she fixed the inflammation at its source. This supports steadier readings and ensures your heart actually gets the vacation it deserves every single night. The fifth step requires us to rethink a relationship that almost every senior has struggled with, the relationship with salt. For decades, the standard advice for high blood pressure has been put down the salt shaker. While reducing sodium is helpful, it is only half of the equation. If you only remove salt, you leave a vacuum. You need to replace it with its biological opposite, the mineral that actually relaxes the artery walls and cools down inflammation. That mineral is potassium. Let me introduce you to Robert. Robert was 80 years old and he was a man of extreme discipline. 5 years ago, his doctor told him his blood pressure was creeping up, so Robert went to war on salt. He stopped adding it to his eggs. He stopped eating soup. He bought low-sodium bread that he said tasted like cardboard. He made his life miserable at the dinner table. Yet, when Robert came to see us, his blood pressure was still hovering around 140/90. He was frustrated and exhausted. He told me, "Dr. Harris, I eat nothing but bland food, and my numbers won't budge. I feel weak, my legs cramp at night, and I have no energy. Robert's mistake was focusing entirely on what to remove rather than what to add. The body uses sodium and potassium like a seesaw. Sodium pulls fluid into the blood vessels, increasing pressure and stiffness. Potassium pumps fluid out and, more importantly, sends a chemical signal to the smooth muscle lining of the arteries to relax. When the artery relaxes, the pressure drops and the inflammation caused by the high-pressure friction subsides. Robert wasn't eating too much salt anymore. He just wasn't eating enough potassium. His diet consisted mostly of tea, toast, and boiled chicken. There were almost no vegetables because he had trouble chewing raw salads. His potassium tank was empty, so his blood vessels remained stiff and constricted. We didn't tell Robert to cut more foods out. We told him to start adding. We looked for soft, senior-friendly foods that are loaded with potassium. We introduced him to avocados, which are soft, easy to eat, and packed with heart-healthy fats and potassium. We suggested steamed spinach and well-cooked white beans or lentils. We even suggested a small glass of low-sodium vegetable juice or tomato juice, checking the label carefully, as an easy way to drink his minerals. The change in Robert was visible within weeks. His leg cramps disappeared first, which was a sign his mineral balance was correcting. Then, his energy returned. Finally, his blood pressure readings began to drop steadily. He wasn't depriving himself. He was nourishing his vessels. By increasing his potassium intake to about 4,000 milligrams a day, which sounds like a lot, but is just a few servings of vegetables and fruits, he allowed his arteries to soften. This is critical because stiff arteries are inflamed arteries. When an artery is stiff, the heart has to pound against it, causing that micro damage we discussed earlier. Potassium is the natural softener. It turns the stiff pipe into a flexible hose. However, a brief safety note is important here. If you have advanced kidney disease or are on certain medications like potassium-sparing diuretics, you must speak with your doctor before making big changes to your potassium intake, as your kidneys might struggle to process it. But for most seniors like Robert, the danger is usually getting too little, not too much. So, look at your plate today. If you have a salty food, do you have a potassium food to balance it? If you have a slice of ham, which is high in sodium, do you have a side of spinach or half an avocado to neutralize it? This balancing act is far more effective and sustainable than living on a diet of cardboard-tasting food. This supports steadier readings and restores the natural flexibility of your cardiovascular system. Comment yes below if you eat leafy greens or other potassium-rich foods daily. It is interesting to see how many of you are already using this lever. The sixth step addresses a visible sign of inflammation that many seniors ignore because the scale tells them they are fine. We often think of obesity as the only weight problem, but where you carry your weight matters far more than how much you weigh. There is a specific type of fat that acts like a toxic organ, pumping inflammatory chemicals directly into your system, spiking both your blood sugar and your blood pressure. Let's talk about Patricia. Patricia was 65 and she had always been proud of her figure. She weighed the same amount she did in her 30s. Her body mass index, or BMI, was squarely in the normal range. Because of this, her previous doctors never discussed weight with her, but Patricia had changed shape. Her arms and legs had become quite thin, while her waistline had expanded. She had what we call central obesity, or more commonly, a belly. Patricia was confused. "I haven't gained a pound," she said, "so why are my sugar and pressure going up?" The problem was visceral fat. This is not the squishy fat you can pinch with your fingers just under the skin. This is the hard fat that packs itself deep inside the abdomen, wrapping around the liver, the pancreas, and the intestines. Unlike fat on your hips or legs, which is mostly just stored energy, visceral fat is biologically active. It behaves like a gland. It secretes cytokines, which are inflammatory signaling molecules. Patricia's belly fat was essentially a factory producing inflammation 24 hours a day. These chemicals were traveling directly to her liver, causing it to become resistant to insulin, raising her blood sugar, and causing her blood vessels to constrict, raising her blood pressure. She was metabolically obese, despite being a normal weight on the scale. This is a very dangerous place to be because you don't look sick, but your body is on fire on the inside. We stopped looking at the scale. We took out a tape measure. The rule of thumb we used for Patricia, and the one you should use, is the waist-to-height ratio. Your waist circumference should be less than half of your height. If you are 64 inches tall, your waist should be less than 32 inches. Patricia's waist was 36 inches. That 4-inch excess was the source of her inflammation. The solution for Patricia was not a crash diet. Starving herself would have only made her lose more muscle from her arms and legs, which she needed. Instead, we focused on two things: stress reduction and protein pacing. We learned that Patricia was under high stress caring for her ailing husband. High cortisol from stress specifically tells the body to store fat in the belly. We worked on simple breathing exercises and finding respite care to lower her stress load. Second, we increased her protein intake slightly at every meal. We made sure she had a palm-sized portion of chicken, fish, or beans 3 times a day. This protein protected her muscle mass, while the slight calorie reduction from cutting out sugary snacks targeted the belly fat. Over 6 months, Patricia didn't lose much weight, maybe 3 pounds, but she lost 2 inches off her waist. Her clothes fit differently, her pants were looser. As that visceral fat shrank, the inflammation factory shut down. Her fasting blood sugar dropped 10 points, and her blood pressure normalized. She had treated the root cause. You can check this yourself right now with a piece of string. Cut a piece of string to your height, fold it in half, wrap it around your waist. If the ends don't meet, you likely have excess visceral fat driving inflammation. Knowing this gives you a clear target that has nothing to do with the generic numbers on a bathroom scale. This supports steadier readings by physically removing the source of the inflammatory signals. If you are finding these stories helpful and want to keep your heart healthy as you age, please take a moment to subscribe. It helps us continue to provide this free health education to seniors around the world. The 7th step is the simplest, cheapest, and yet most frequently neglected lever for senior heart health. It involves the physics of your blood itself. We often think of blood pressure as a problem with the pipes, the arteries, or the pump, the heart. But we rarely think about the fluid itself. If the fluid is too thick, the pump has to work harder and the pressure rises. This thickness is called viscosity, and for seniors, it is directly tied to a glass of water. Consider Thomas. Thomas was 78 years old. Like many men his age, he had some prostate issues and had to use the bathroom frequently. Because of this, Thomas had developed a strategy. He stopped drinking water. He would have a small cup of coffee in the morning and maybe a sip of water with his dinner pills, but that was it. He was terrified of needing the restroom while he was out driving or at the store. Thomas came to us complaining of fatigue, dizziness upon standing, and chronically high blood pressure. He thought the dizziness meant his pressure was too low, but when we checked, it was 160/95. He was baffled. "How can I be dizzy and have high pressure?" he asked. The answer was dehydration. Because Thomas wasn't drinking, his total blood volume had dropped. When blood volume drops, the body panics and clamps down the arteries to maintain pressure to the brain, driving the numbers up. Furthermore, because he was dehydrated, the water content of his blood was low, meaning his blood was more concentrated. It was thick and sticky, like honey or syrup, rather than free-flowing like water. Thick blood causes friction against the vessel walls. Friction causes, you guessed it, inflammation. His heart was having to exert massive force to push this sludge through his system. The dizziness was a sign that the thick blood wasn't circulating efficiently to his brain when he stood up, while the high pressure was a sign of how hard his heart was squeezing. We had to negotiate with Thomas. We understood his fear of the bathroom, so we didn't tell him to drink gallons of water all day long. We used a strategy called front-loading. We asked Thomas to drink 2 full glasses of water right when he woke up and another large glass about 30 minutes before lunch. He was allowed to taper off his drinking in the late afternoon and evening so he could sleep through the night without waking up to use the restroom. By front-loading his hydration, he thinned his blood early in the day, right when the morning surge we discussed in step 1 was happening. He increased his blood volume, which allowed his body to relax the clamping of his arteries. The results were almost immediate. Within 3 days, Thomas reported that his brain fog had lifted, his dizziness upon standing vanished, and interestingly, his resting blood pressure dropped by nearly 15 points. He was effectively taking a blood thinner, but that thinner was just water. Dehydration is a state of inflammation. When your cells are dry, they are stressed. When your blood is thick, it is abrasive. For seniors, the thirst mechanism in the brain actually weakens with age. You can be severely dehydrated and not feel thirsty. That is why you cannot rely on thirst alone. You must drink by schedule habit, not by feel. A quick safety note: if you have congestive heart failure and your doctor has put you on a fluid restriction, you must follow their specific limits. But for the vast majority of seniors, the goal should be clear, pale urine. If it is dark yellow, your blood is too thick and your heart is working too hard. Thomas found that by drinking early, he emptied his bladder before he went out for his afternoon errands, so his lifestyle wasn't disrupted, but his heart was protected. This supports steadier readings by ensuring the fluid moving through your system is easy to pump, reducing the workload and the friction on your delicate artery linings. The 8th step takes us to a part of the body that almost no one associates with their heart until it is too late. We tend to think of heart health as happening strictly in the chest, but one of the primary entry points for inflammation, the spark that lights the fire in your arteries, is actually inside your mouth. There is a direct, proven highway between the health of your gums and the stability of your blood pressure and blood sugar. Let me tell you about Eleanor. Eleanor was 74 years old. She was meticulous about her appearance and her diet. She didn't smoke, she didn't drink alcohol, and she walked daily. However, for years, Eleanor had noticed a little bit of pink in the sink when she brushed her teeth. Her gums were slightly puffy and tender. She assumed this was just a normal part of aging, or perhaps that she was brushing too hard. She didn't have tooth pain, so she skipped her dental cleanings for about 3 years to save money. During a routine checkup, we found her inflammatory markers, specifically one called C-reactive protein, were alarmingly high. Her blood sugar was also becoming erratic, spiking higher than her diet could explain. We couldn't find an infection in her lungs or her bladder. The source was hidden. When she finally saw a dentist, the diagnosis was advanced periodontal disease. Here is why this matters for your heart. Your gums are full of blood vessels. When you have gum disease, the barrier between the bacteria in your mouth and your bloodstream becomes permeable. Every time Eleanor chewed food, millions of inflammatory bacteria were leaking directly into her blood. These bacteria do not just stay in the mouth, they travel. When they reach the heart vessels, they trigger an immediate immune response. The body attacks the bacteria, causing inflammation in the artery walls. This inflammation makes the arteries stiffer, raising blood pressure, and makes insulin work less effectively, raising blood sugar. Eleanor's harmless bleeding gums were acting like a slow drip IV of poison directly into her cardiovascular system. The change for Eleanor didn't involve a heart pill. It involved a deep dental cleaning and a rigorous new hygiene routine. She started using a water flosser daily to clean below the gum line where the brush couldn't reach. 3 months after treating her gums, her C-reactive protein levels dropped by 40%. Her blood sugar stabilized because her immune system wasn't distracted fighting a war in her mouth. If you have bleeding gums, bad breath that won't go away, or loose teeth, do not ignore it. You cannot have a healthy heart with an unhealthy mouth. The inflammation is systemic. For many seniors, dexterity can make flossing with string difficult. If that is the case, I highly recommend a water flosser. It is easier to hold and incredibly effective at flushing out the inflammatory bacteria. This supports steadier readings by closing the front door to infection and keeping your immune system calm. Comment yes below if you use a water flosser or if you stick to traditional floss. The 9th step involves a mineral that acts as the off switch for your body's stress response. We already talked about potassium, but there is another mineral that works hand in hand with it: magnesium. If calcium is the mineral that helps muscles contract and harden, magnesium is the mineral that allows them to release and relax. Without it, your blood vessels remain in a state of chronic low-grade constriction. Consider the case of Carl. Carl was 69, a retired engineer who suffered from three distinct problems that he thought were unrelated. First, his blood pressure was stubborn. It wouldn't come down despite medication. Second, he had terrible leg cramps at night that woke him up. Third, his blood sugar was creeping up into the pre-diabetic range. Carl was taking calcium supplements because he was told they were good for his bones, but he was taking them in isolation. In the body, calcium and magnesium compete. By flooding his system with calcium without enough magnesium, he was essentially telling his body to contract, contract, contract. His arteries were stiffening, calcifying, and his cells were struggling to accept insulin because magnesium is required for the insulin receptor to open the door for sugar. We looked at Carl's diet. He didn't eat nuts, seeds, or leafy greens, the primary sources of magnesium. He was running on empty. We adjusted his routine. We didn't just give him a pill immediately. We started with food. We had him add a quarter cup of pumpkin seeds to his afternoon routine. Pumpkin seeds are a powerhouse of magnesium. We also swapped his white rice for quinoa and added almonds. For the leg cramps, which are a classic sign of magnesium deficiency, we suggested he try a topical magnesium oil or lotion on his legs before bed. The skin absorbs magnesium very well, bypassing the digestive system, which can be sensitive in older adults. The results for Carl were fascinating. The leg cramps stopped within 3 days. That was the first sign his muscles were finally relaxing. Over the next month, his systolic blood pressure, the top number, dropped by 8 points. His blood vessels were finally exhaling. Furthermore, his fasting blood sugar improved because magnesium helps sensitize the body to insulin. If you feel tense, if you have muscle twitches, or if you are constipated, another sign of low magnesium, as the gut muscles are too tight to move, you might be low in this vital mineral. However, a safety note. Just like with potassium, if you have severe kidney issues, check with your doctor before adding magnesium supplements. But for food sources like pumpkin seeds, almonds, and spinach, these are generally safe and highly effective. This supports steadier readings by chemically instructing your blood vessel walls to let go of the tension. The 10th step brings us to a mistake many seniors make in the bathroom that destroys a natural gas their body produces to lower blood pressure. This gas is called nitric oxide. It is a vasodilator. It widens the blood vessels to let blood flow freely. Your body produces it in the lining of your arteries, but it also produces it in a surprising place, on the back of your tongue. Let's talk about Henry. Henry was 76. He was a very clean man who hated germs. Every morning and every night, he used a strong, alcohol-based antiseptic mouthwash. He swished for a full minute, stinging his mouth, believing he was killing all the bad bugs. Henry's blood pressure was a mystery. He was thin, active, and ate well, yet his pressure was consistently 150/90. Here is the science Henry didn't know. There are specific bacteria on the back of your tongue that are essential for your heart. These bacteria convert nitrates from your food, like lettuce or beets, into nitrites. When you swallow those nitrites, your stomach acid converts them into nitric oxide, which travels to your blood and dilates your arteries. By using a strong antiseptic mouthwash twice a day, Henry was nuking his oral microbiome. He was killing the good guys along with the bad guys. He had essentially shut down his body's natural blood pressure lowering system. Research has shown that using strong antiseptic mouthwash can raise blood pressure by several points within hours. We asked Henry to stop the mouthwash for 2 weeks. He was hesitant, worried about his breath. We told him to brush and floss, but skip the chemical rinse. The result? His blood pressure dropped. It wasn't a miracle cure that fixed everything, but it shaved off the top 5 points that were keeping him in the danger zone. His body resumed its natural production of nitric oxide. To boost this further, we asked Henry to eat more nitrates. The champions here are beets and arugula. Henry started having a small glass of beet juice mixed with a little apple juice, to cut the earthy taste, 3 times a week. Beets are one of the most potent vessel wideners on the planet. Within an hour of drinking beet juice, many seniors see a measurable drop in blood pressure because of that flood of nitric oxide. It improves blood flow to the brain and the legs as well. So, Look at your bathroom counter. If you are using a harsh mouthwash that burns, you might be washing away your heart health. Switch to a milder, alcohol-free rinse, or simply rely on good brushing and flossing. And if you want a natural boost, consider adding beets or dark leafy greens to your lunch. This supports steadier readings by preserving the biological pathways your body uses to regulate its own pressure. Subscribe now if you are learning something new about how your body works. It helps us keep this channel going. The 11th step is about the internal mesh that protects you from blood sugar spikes. We often talk about what to eat, but we rarely talk about the order in which we eat it or the packaging of our food. This is about fiber, but not just for digestion. We are using fiber as a sponge. Meet Beatrice. Beatrice was 82. She had a sweet tooth. She knew she shouldn't have cookies or white pasta, but she lived alone and found cooking difficult, so she often relied on easy, soft foods that were high in starch. Her blood sugar was erratic, swinging from high to low, leaving her dizzy and inflamed. When blood sugar spikes rapidly, it causes inflammation. We needed to blunt that spike without forcing Beatrice to cook complex meals she couldn't handle. We introduced her to the concept of the fiber-first rule. Soluble fiber, the kind found in oats, psyllium husk, flax seeds, and the inside of apples, dissolves in water to form a gel. If you eat this fiber before you eat your carbohydrates, that gel coats the lining of the small intestine. Think of it like putting a mesh screen over a drain. When Beatrice ate her pasta or her cookie afterwards, the sugar from that food had to fight its way through the fiber gel to get into her bloodstream. This slowed down the absorption. Instead of a sugar tsunami, she got a slow trickle. We had Beatrice do one simple thing. Before her main meal, she would drink a glass of water mixed with a teaspoon of psyllium husk, a natural fiber supplement found in most pharmacies. It is tasteless and easy to drink. By creating this internal mesh before eating, her post-meal blood sugar numbers dropped by 20%. She didn't change what she ate for dinner. She just changed the environment of her stomach. Additionally, this soluble fiber acts like a sponge for cholesterol. As it moves through the digestive system, it grabs onto bile acids, which are made of cholesterol, and drags them out of the body. Beatrice's cholesterol numbers improved along with her blood sugar. If you struggle with blood sugar spikes after meals, or if you simply want to lower your cholesterol naturally, try eating your fiber first. Have a small salad, some steamed broccoli, or a fiber supplement drink 10 minutes before your main meal. It is a physical barrier against inflammation. This supports steadier readings by mechanically slowing down digestion. The 12th and final step is about thermal stress. This is a seasonal and environmental trigger that sends thousands of seniors to the emergency room every winter, yet it is rarely discussed in checkups. It is the effect of cold on your arteries. Let's look at Frank. Frank was 71 and lived in a region with chilly winters. He was a tough guy who didn't like to bundle up just to walk to the mailbox or take the trash out. He also believed that finishing his morning shower with icy cold water was good for his immunity. Frank's blood pressure was perfectly controlled in the summer, but every winter it went haywire. His doctor would increase his dosage in November and decrease it in April. Frank didn't understand why his body was so seasonal. The reason is vasoconstriction. When cold air hits your skin, especially the face and the neck, your body's survival instinct kicks in. It wants to preserve heat for your internal organs. To do this, it clamps down the blood vessels in your skin and extremities to push blood to the core. When you take a wide river and force it into a narrow channel, the pressure goes up. For a senior with already stiff arteries, a blast of cold air can cause a massive, sudden spike in blood pressure. Frank's healthy cold showers were actually causing a shock to his system every morning, spiking his pressure right at the time of the morning surge we discussed in step 1. And his walks to the mailbox without a scarf were causing thermal stress. We advised Frank to stop the cold showers. While they might be good for a 20-year-old athlete, for a 71-year-old with hypertension, the shock is often too great. We also instituted a scarf rule. If the temperature was below 50 degrees, Frank had to cover his neck and nose. Warming the air before you breathe, it prevents the lungs from triggering that sympathetic nervous system reflex. Frank made these small adjustments. He kept his home slightly warmer. He dressed in layers. His winter blood pressure stabilized, and he no longer needed the seasonal medication increase. Be aware of your environment. If you walk into a cold grocery store with strong air conditioning, or if you step out into a winter wind, your pressure will rise. Protect your neck, protect your head, and avoid sudden thermal shocks. This supports steadier readings by keeping your vessels relaxed and open, rather than clamped shut in defense. Conclusion: we have now traveled through 12 distinct, powerful steps to reclaim your heart health. We started by uncovering the morning surge and ensuring you aren't measuring your pressure when the fire is already out. We exposed the truth that sugar is often the real arsonist, damaging your arteries, while cholesterol is just the firefighter. We learned how a simple 15-minute walk after meals can use your muscles to clear glucose. We discovered how treating sleep apnea and prioritizing rest can stop the nightly chemical attack on your heart. We balanced your diet by adding potassium to relax the vessels, rather than just cutting salt. We measured your waist-to-height ratio to find the hidden visceral fat factory. We used hydration to thin the blood and reduce the workload on your pump. We looked into the mouth, realizing that gum health is heart health. We added magnesium to release the tension in your muscles and arteries. We protected your nitric oxide by ditching harsh mouthwash and eating beets. We used fiber as a mesh to slow down sugar absorption. And finally, we respected the power of temperature to prevent cold-induced spikes. These 12 levers are your toolkit. They are not about fear. They are about control. Most people feel helpless when they see high numbers on a screen. They feel like their body is betraying them. But your body is not betraying you. It is reacting. It is reacting to the food, the timing, the stress, and the environment. When you change the input, you change the reaction. You do not need to overhaul your entire life by tomorrow morning. That is a recipe for failure. Pick one lever from this list. Maybe this week, you focus entirely on your hydration. Next week, you add the post-meal walk. The week after, you buy a water flosser. Small, consistent actions compound over time. A slightly lower sugar spike today means slightly less inflammation tonight. Slightly better sleep means a lower morning surge tomorrow. Step by step, you are cooling the fire. I'm Dr. Ben Harris. It has been a privilege to share this roadmap with you. If this video has given you a new perspective on your health, please share it with a friend or family member who needs to hear this. Together, we can change the way we age. Subscribe for more, and I will see you in the next video.